officially over. The play-in tournament, the first of its kind, essentially, starts this week for us. Game 1 and 2, which will be Indiana versus Charlotte and Boston versus Washington. That's going to be Tuesday, May 18th. So as of recording this, that will be tomorrow. So depending on when you're listening, it'll either happen or started to happen. So we figured we would start off the show starting with the play-in tournament as our warm-up jumper because, the season officially over, like we said, this weekend kind of wrapped it up. I think all 30 teams were playing on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. And there was still a lot. I actually saw this stat. 17 seeds still needed to be locked in as of Sunday, which was wild. A little humble excitement on our side. The 76ers are the number 1 seed for the first time since 2001.
We are number 1. We are number 1.
But I will say, in the past, there have been teams that have been the number 1, and it hasn't necessarily mattered. So we'll wait for the playoffs to start. I'm kind of excited that they do get a little bit of a rest before it goes because of this tournament. So over to the bigger news that everybody's talking about. We get in this play-in tournament a LeBron James versus Steph Curry to claim the 7th seed. The Lakers do hold the 2-1 advantage over the Warriors, but Steph Curry has been cooking as of late. Obviously, there's talk of injury concern with LeBron and Anthony Davis. LeBron James played the last 2 games over the weekend. And the thing ESPN's kind of honing in on right now is the ankle tweak that he did. Landed on another player after going up for a layup or a rebound. I can't remember the play specifically. Kind of goes back to my argument of, I understand you wanted to play him out there, maybe get some reps in before the playoffs, but you want to make sure you're going into a play-in tournament against the Warriors 100% because Steph Curry is literally cooking. LeBron James even said that he wants him or thinks he should be the MVP this year, which is fine, but it's Jokic, so let's stop doing that because that does bother me a little bit at times. When if I'm Jokic, I'm sitting there like, LeBron, what the hell else do I need to do? Why are you calling Steph the MVP? I understand he's at, what is it? Well, yeah, that's part of it. Yeah. But either way, how do you feel about the play-in tournament? I actually have the playoffs in general pulled up. So the play-in stuff that's going to go on, Memphis and Spurs will play. Then go into the winner of the 9 and 10. Obviously, Lakers and Golden State will play to, winner plays Phoenix. Loser goes on to play whoever Memphis and San Antonio wins. And then winner of that goes on to play Utah. And then you can do the same for the East, which is Indy, Charlotte goes on to play whoever the loser of the 7-8 is. They get the 76ers. And then the winner of Boston, Washington goes on to play Brooklyn, who had one hell of a play over the weekend. I don't know if you saw it with the Blake Griffin, behind the back throw. And then somehow, they look like they're all on the same page. So that's a little intimidating, of course, right before the playoffs.
Well, so a couple of thoughts to just kind of, because there's really a lot to get here first. So I'm going to try to go in order. Number one, listen, I know LeBron made those comments about the play-in games a couple of weeks ago. I know a couple of people have said, hey, maybe this should have stayed a bubble thing. I'll tell you what, you want to talk about the regular season having purpose in the last month. I mean, we've talked at times this season because of the condensed schedule, because of how quick the turnaround is, because of COVID. But the NBA season has felt like a bit of a slog at points.
Yeah.
In the regular season in particular, a lot of blowouts, a lot of guys missing games, a lot of injuries, a lot of just things that didn't matter. But this last month, it really mattered. And even this last weekend, I can't remember a last weekend of the regular season where, what did you say? 17 seats were still in play
17.
technically nobody was really locked into anything. And you had regular season games that mattered. You had teams making decisions to either start guys or rest guys. And some of the games were a little, some of the games yesterday, for example, were a little anticlimactic for some of the playoff teams. Like you said, the Sixers were resting yesterday. I think I don't think any of their starters played against the Magic yesterday, for example.
Well, they didn't need to.
Yeah, a couple of other teams like that. But like we said, this was high-stakes drama all the way through the end of the night with the West Coast games. You had a couple of Utah, for example, is playing Sacramento to lock up number 1. Phoenix had a game to stay in that conversation. They had a dramatic Etuan Moore hit the buzzer beater against the Spurs, their last game of the season, to keep them in at least in the time being, and potentially in play for number one. There is just a whole lot going on. And so to that point, I don't see this going anywhere. Like, I think
Yeah,
this, if anything, this shows that this is a resounding success. I think the past few weeks, we kind of knew who was going to be, like, we knew who the 10 teams in each conference were going to be. Like, Chicago hung on for a little
sure.
bit, and New
Yeah.
Orleans hung on a little bit with Sacramento in the West. But realistically, we kind of knew what it was, even with the Spurs just brutal schedule down the line, even with Charlotte kind of stumbling at the end of the season, losing 5 straight. But so to me, to that point, first off, I just want to say that I think the play-in is just an absolutely massive success. And I really can't see this going anywhere anytime soon for the NBA. I think they're really on to something. And I think, we'll see what the ratings do this week. But I mean, like you said, we got LeBron versus Steph. Got to imagine that's going to get some viewers in
Hmm.
there. In terms of the actual games themselves, I guess we'll start in the West just because that is the marquee matchup. And I mean, give credit to Portland. Portland held off the Lakers. I mean, Portland had a scenario last night too, where if they lost to Denver, that would have been a situation where they would have been down in the 7th seed and they would have been playing Steph. And you would have had Dame versus Steph, and we know how that can go. I am excited for this game the most personally, just because, like you said, both these teams are red hot. The Warriors have won 6 straight. The Lakers have won 5 straight. The AD looks like he's rounded into form. Obviously, you've got LeBron back in the lineup. For the Warriors, you've got Steph. Andrew Wiggins, who we talked a little bit about last week, plug for last episode, has been really, really good recently. And I mean, the Warriors do it in spite of not having Kelly Oubre as well, who's been missing time with the wrist injury. So you got to really give them credit there. Obviously, no James Wiseman as well. They haven't had him in quite a bit. So I think this is just going to be a tremendous matchup. I do
Hmm.
think the Lakers are going to win. I mean, I would be remiss to be beating the Lakers, or the best team in the league, drum, and then say they're going to lose a play-in game to the
Right, right.
Warriors. So I think the Lakers will clinch 7. I do think the Warriors will beat either Memphis or San Antonio. I'm inclined to think Memphis is going to win that game. They've been, playing a little better at the end of the season. Granted, San Antonio's 2-8 struggles. Again, it goes back to that just ridiculous schedule they had at the end of the season, where it's
Yeah.
like they played every top team basically in the last
They
10
went through
games.
the gauntlet.
Yeah, but I also wonder with them going through the gauntlet if that doesn't kind of wear them out a little bit as well.
Yeah.
So I do have Memphis. I mean, Memphis also knows what it's like to lose a play-in game with last year, so I kind of like their little bit more experience here when we're talking about two younger teams playing each other. I know San Antonio's got DeRozan, and he in theory could just take over for one single game, and very well could. I mean, DeMar's got the
Hmm.
most experience, and that to me would be the argument for San Antonio, and then obviously the coaching with Pop as well. But I think Memphis wins. I think Memphis goes on to play Golden State. I think Golden State wins that game as well. We already got a preview of that matchup this week, with Golden State winning round one. Again, that's a scenario that had real life implications. So that was again just another reason why I think this is working. But I do think Golden State gets in. I think Steph is just playing too out of control right now. Which would then, like you said, give us Warriors Jazz round one, and would give us Lakers Suns round one. Something that we'll probably get into later if that officially happens once this goes down. But that is cruel and unusual for Phoenix as they get back into the first round and to get thrown into the Lakers right away. I mean, they're like, it's just going to feel really, really weird to me if Phoenix, because people are going to view that Phoenix season as a failure. And it's like, look, if you're the number 2 seed, you just happen to lose the Lakers because they got hurt and dropped all the way to 7. It's like, come on, if Phoenix was
Yeah.
playing Portland, I don't think there'd be anyone who is watching or doing basketball podcasts or on ESPN or whatever. Like, I don't think there'd be many people picking Portland over Phoenix in that series. Put it that way. I think if they were playing Dallas, I don't think there'd be many people picking Dallas over Phoenix in that series. With Denver, maybe even as well, I would give Phoenix the edge. But and again, like even if you go down to the Warriors, any of those 3 other teams, they beat them. But I don't think I'm not picking against the Lakers in a 7-game series after all that talking I've done this year.
I'm not picking against them, but I also don't think I think like I've heard from the ESPN guys get up and all that stuff. I've heard a lot of talk of like the Lakers want the Suns matchup. You want that Suns matchup. And I'd be like, "Do you though?" Because
Do you?
they've kind of shown that like it's not going to be in walk in the park, and you've got a team that's still kind of rebounding from injuries. So yes, I think, if it came down to that matchup, and there's a really good chance that it does, I think it it won't be as easy as a lot of people just that kind of pay like casual attention to the NBA think it would be. And I also think there's like a real legitimate chance that the Suns just whoop up on them and then we move on, like there is a good chance of that as well. I understand nobody's going to really necessarily bet against LeBron James because just at this point we've learned not to do that. But I don't, I think the Suns have a real legitimate chance to make a statement with that game. If they do come out and beat the Lakers, I think it puts everybody on notice a little bit too,
I think you might start looking at them as the favorites if they come out
Yeah.
and they beat the Lakers, and they very well could. Like, that's the thing. The Suns won 51 games this year. This is not a
Yeah.
bad basketball team. They've got Chris Paul, they've got Devin Booker, they've got, a deep rotation with Ayton and Bridges and everybody. Like, they will. There's a reason they're the number 2 seed in the Western Conference. I mean, we've talked recently,
Well,
like
they're
Phoenix, you could talk me into winning the whole thing. So I would be
well
remiss to just say they're going to get stomped by the Lakers, but I
to
would still pick the Lakers, and that's the
yeah.
problem. And that's where I would pick the Lakers in a 7-game series, put it that way. And that's where it would just be tremendously disappointing because I think Phoenix, if they're on any other portion of the bracket, wins 1-2 series potentially.
Yeah, and on top of that, that 51 wins is good enough for second, literally in the entire NBA. Like they would be the 1 seed in the East, which we always do the East to West comparisons at the end of the year. So that's a big part of it too. For how good we talk about the Nets and the Sixers. Like the Suns have a better record, and they play in the West, so there are tougher matchups at times when it comes down to it. So I think, I think, yes, a lot of people are probably going to sleep on the Suns a little bit here. And I think, LeBron James deserves that respect because it's LeBron James and it's the Lakers and they have Anthony Davis. And, you're probably not going to bet against that. They're the returning champs. But I think a lot of people are going to just take that at face value and not necessarily think, man, the Suns are going to come out here and really put some people on notice and maybe kind of show out a little bit.
It would have the potential to be one of the best first round series in my opinion, in terms of just the sheer talent that's on the floor, in terms of the matchup. Like, it could have everything you wanted for it. I just think it's unfortunate again that we may, if
Oh,
the
of course.
Lakers end up making this happen, lose one of these teams pretty early on. I think that's
Well,
pretty disappointing.
to that, when you're the first or second seed, you kind of reap the benefit of potentially playing a team that's not necessarily not deserving of being in the playoffs, but a team that obviously almost hardly made it. And so, like, you look at the East, right? The Sixers end up playing potentially a Hornets, a Pacers, a Boston, a Washington. Like that's a matchup. Boston always a little worries the Sixers fans because that's just how it goes. But I think if you're the Sixers going up against any of those, you feel kind of confident. You feel pretty good about it. Probably same for the Nets in the second seed, depending on any of
Yeah,
those
I
teams.
feel great about either of
Yeah,
those. Any of those. There's no planet where Philly and Brooklyn shouldn't win their first round series, no matter who
right.
comes out of it. Likewise with Utah. I think Utah, if Golden State is 8, if Memphis is 8, like whoever ends up coming out of this, like
Well,
Steph Curry will scare you for a few games, but like I think Utah will handle the Warriors. Like, I'm not
so
really worried about the upset there.
you think it's that you think it's legit? Like already lock it in. Phoenix is playing the Lakers, and then out of Memphis, San Antonio, Golden State will be up against Utah somewhere.
I think, yeah, that's what I think it looks like in the West.
Yeah,
I just those 2 teams are a little bit better. It's a little different for me in the East. I'm not going to get as chalky. Well, I guess I am. So
it's chalky. Yeah,
the way this finished is Boston is 7, Washington is 8, Indy is 9, and Charlotte is 10. Washington, we've talked about for weeks the late surge, Russ playing out of his mind. Indy did enough. Indy's been way more up and down, but they ended up having the same records as the Wizards. Boston just gets brutal. I mean, with Jaylen Brown, like that's just the kicker in the cake of this terrible season for Boston. Boston still has Jason Tatum. Kemba Walker's been playing great the last month. So again, I'm never going to discount Boston, but I mean, without Jaylen Brown, I think that's a massive step back. I mean, the only reason we gave them a chance, or I basically said last episode that I gave them a chance, is if that duo is healthy. I think they just can take over a series for a little bit. So I think the way I look at it is I think Washington is going to upset Boston in the
okay.
7-8 game. And so I think Washington is going to jump to 7, which would be fun then, because then you get Russ and KD first round. So that will certainly be a lot of fun. Bradley Beal on the floor as well. So a lot of talent for that Brooklyn Washington matchup. But I think Washington is the hot team. I just think they're going to pick Boston right now. I do think Boston will hold on, though. I'm not about to just knock them out of the playoffs. I think Indy will beat Charlotte. Charlotte, it's all house money right now, but unfortunately, they're just not 100%. I think it would be a different story then. If LaMelo Ball was still at full strength, he's coming back from the injury. Obviously, Gordon Hayward is missing time as well. So it's all house money for Charlotte. So I think they can go into this and say, maybe play a little looser than some of these other teams. I mean, definitely more than Indy, and so I think you can give them some benefit there. But no, I think Indy is going to beat Charlotte and they'll end up playing Boston in the 8-9 game. I do think Boston holds on and wins that series. Jason Tatum has a mega game, and then the Sixers play the Celtics first round. I got to be honest. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, and I swear to God, this isn't me being a homer, but I think you're looking at the reverse of last year. Like Boston swept the Sixers out of the playoffs last year. I think Philly's sweeping Boston out of the playoffs this year. I mean, they went 3-1 against them this year. They're missing Jaylen Brown. Embiid can dominate that interior. They don't remotely have anyone that can stop him. I think we've seen it. It's Boston, and I don't ever want to. Like the silly things can happen when they play the Sixers, but this is a year where I feel way more confident about them beating Boston than I really ever have. I don't think that Boston team is that good.
I'm with you. This year I feel confident more than others, but I've been burned by that matchup numerous times in the past, like you even referenced with the playoffs last year.
But we knew that. We knew they were going to lose.
Know.
I didn't know that it would be a sweep and it would get that ugly. I thought maybe they'd at least stretch it to 5 or something. They were playing really bad at the time.
You know what?
But no, they were terrible last year. I didn't think they remotely had a chance against Boston. This year, I think it's the opposite.
To that, if you're the Sixers looking at any of these potential teams that you could match up against, I think anyone out of the 7-8, those two, you go, I really don't want to play either of those guys right now. Like, no offense to Charlotte, no offense to Indy. Like, I'd probably rather play those two. Yes, they are also they're the lower seeds, in terms of seeding for this too. Like, in my mind, that's you kind of hope somehow Boston, if they lose to, Russ, then that they've put a lot into it and they kind of run out of steam in the matchup against whoever the 9-10 is, and that kind of gets you the matchup of maybe it's the Hornets, maybe it's the Pacers a little bit more. I think you'd prefer that kind of matchup for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if there's a scenario, and likewise with Brooklyn, like if there's a scenario where you get Charlotte or you get Indy into that 7 spot and they end up playing them, oh yeah, I think you absolutely are rooting for that matchup. They will.
Well, I don't think they can. Now you might have to correct me here because I think the only Indy and Charlotte, the only scenario,
right.
They could only be coming out to play Philly. Yeah.
Okay.
So
well then, yes, you're right. In that case, I think best case scenario. As crazy as it sounds, maybe Boston, if you're Brooklyn. Like, if I'm Brooklyn, I might want Boston more than Washington. Washington's been annoyingly good recently.
Annoyingly good. And, Russ will be talking some shit on the court and probably getting in KD's head a little bit, or trying to at least, obviously.
Bradley Beal can go off at any moment and drop 60 on you. Again, I'm not worried about either of those teams getting upset in the first round. But if I'm strictly talking what's going to annoy me for the later rounds, I probably don't want Washington.
Yeah,
pretty well right now.
I mean, if you're either of these teams, Sixers or Sixers or Nets, I think a big part of what you're trying to do is you're thinking, okay, let's just get 4 games, let's sweep them, then we get a little bit of a break again, we can rest up and get good. Where there's a good chance if you're on the east side, you think, okay, we can kind of cook our way through this. And if we can do it quickly, there's potential that if you think it's the Lakers that are coming out of this, or the Clippers or Utah or Phoenix, like these guys are going to have to battle in the West to get anywhere.
Whole second round. If you're Milwaukee, you got to battle the whole time. Milwaukee's got Miami first round.
Milwaukee's got Miami, but for the Sixers, really, hopefully you can get to a point where the only thing you've got to worry about is potentially maybe Brooklyn. By the end, yes, there's a potential potential Milwaukee or Miami matchup.
Well, we'll get
Second
into this. Listen, we'll get into that. How
yeah.
it broke, baby. We were talking. Again, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but when we're going to take a look at the East bracket, we're going to take a look at the West bracket a little later on, and just kind of talk about how. I mean, not to turn this into a homer pod too quick, but I don't think it could have broke any better for the Sixers. You could have written a better bracket if we were, short of like Charlotte somehow jumping up to 4. Which that sounds mean. I don't want it to sound like I'm disrespectful. Charlotte had an awesome season. They've legitimately been one of the most fun teams to watch in the NBA this season. If they were healthy, I think this is a completely different scenario. And I think we're talking about Charlotte. I mean, maybe being as high as 7 or 8 if they had been able to keep everybody healthy. But just unfortunately one of those things that got sapped by injuries. Welcome everybody to the Driving Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rayfuse. Joining me as always, my co-host Justin Kuzart.
Oh boy, hold on. I'm trying to get to the tweet. Oh no, where is it? Oh, here it is. 50, 40, 90 for the God at Kyrie Irving.
Oh, I saw this. Yeah, this was KD, correct? I saw Chris Paul miss 50, 40, 90 too. He tweeted about it with the the hand on the face emoji because I think he missed it by point. He was at like 39.5 and like 49.5, and then he had the free throw percentage. Chris Paul actually led the league in free throw percentage this year. I think
that's one of those. That's one of those things where you emailed the dean and been like, "Hey, can we round this up?"
Can you go back and retroactively just say that these 2 shots went in? Like nobody saw anything.
Yeah, come on, man. Let me just have this, Yeah, for sure. That's got to be frustrating as a player to see that you were that close and that you missed. Because that's like you go back to a game where you missed a free throw. Well, I guess it wasn't the free throw, but you go back to a game where you missed something, and it's just like, oh man.
Well, and going back to that Brooklyn possession that you mentioned a little earlier that everybody's talking about. I mean, that Blake Griffin pass was just the most ridiculous part to me. That was insane. But when they got Harden back, and if Harden looks healthy, like that to me is where they flipped the switch, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, it's playoff time. Like,
oh yeah,
right. This is Brooklyn. Like, I know they've been stumbling a little bit when they don't have everybody, but it's like you get James Harden back, and they have depth. That's where to me why Brooklyn is so impressive. It's the depth. It's not. It has nothing to do. I mean, the big 3 obviously can outscore anybody by themselves, but like you could sell me on scenarios where they get beat by bench units. Their bench is good.
Yeah, I know. That's the problem. Is this team the Nets are so deep and so talented in every single freaking way you look at it, almost. So that's the scary part. And I think a lot of people are being like, well, we didn't really see what they had or what they're capable of in the regular season. But I think
they're built for the playoffs. They're not built. You don't really. Maybe you see glimpses of the surface, and I think from a strictly just entertainment perspective, that's peak entertainment with Brooklyn. But again, it's almost it was like that warning shot almost that it's like, hey, just a reminder, like we're still here. We're still the favorites, in my opinion, in the Eastern Conference, and maybe to win the whole thing, which is something that we can get into in a little bit. But KD definitely tweeted about that. Kyrie there again. When Kyrie's locked in, you know what it is. He's one of the best players in the NBA. He's just the natural talent, the raw talent is so high. Best handles in the league as well. Can also help with that. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We will read them on the podcast. You're not an Apple user, Stitcher, Player FM, Spreaker, TuneIn, Amazon Music, Google Play Store, anywhere that you can find a podcast, you can find us.
Yep, and be sure to find us at Driving Dish NBA on YouTube. We have a video version of the podcast. If you would like to check it out, that's where we will be. Last check, we were at 7. I don't know if we gained any followers as of last week, but we are fairly
up a little bit.
Yeah, well, that and as I lean into we are fairly active. Like you can hit us with questions there in comments and react to things we're saying, and we'll be sure to chat with you about it. And if you want to take the conversation to social media, you can follow us on social media as well. You can look at Driving Dish, or you can follow myself or Kevin. I'm Justin C on the air. He's refused to lose, and you can chat with us about it as the playoffs get ready here.
Yeah, like the Facebook page too at Driving Dish NBA Podcast. I don't think we said that in a while, but give us a like over there. Put some clips up there as well. And now a word from our sponsors.
So we start in the East because we're homers, and that's what we're going to do. And so that's how it is. In the East, the playoffs are as so. We kind of talked a little bit about Philly. They're going to play whoever the winner of 9-10 or loser of 7-8 is after the play-in tournament. I got the matchup I wanted with the Knicks and Atlanta. I think that's going to be really fun. I believe I saw Atlanta's favored to win, but their win probability is at like 59% or something like that. So it should be kind of tight.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one. But yeah, to that, it's a little slight on the Knicks because they don't
have
the
home
Knicks.
court.
Yeah, the Knicks are the better seeded team in this scenario. And then you got Milwaukee versus Miami. And then Brooklyn versus the winner of 7 and 8, whether that's Boston or Washington. We shall see later on this week.
Yeah, and so I mean, right off the rip, Milwaukee, Miami is going to just be a slugfest right away.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Miami is talk about playing their best basketball of the year. I mean, a lot of y'all saw me get negative on Twitter just because Miami just blew the doors off the Sixers the other night. I mean, just beat the hell out of them with a completely full lineup. They look like they're in playoff form. I think they've had the best offensive rating in the NBA since May. Their shooters are coming around. Tyler Hero's playing great coming off the bench. Kendrick Nunn has stepped it up recently as well. I mean, it got to the point where like Victor Oladipo is out and is not going to play the rest of the season. And Miami's playing so well that that didn't even come up on most people's radars. You almost forgot that he was there. Where it's like, oh right, they traded for Victor Oladipo. They expected him to be a big part of this rotation because they're playing so well. They're playing their best basketball of the year. There was an opportunity, I thought, I mean, because it was interesting on Saturday when people were asking, should Milwaukee essentially tank their way out of this game, let Miami win so that Miami gets up, because Miami wouldn't have had the tiebreaker over Atlanta, but they would have over New York. So there was a scenario where you could have put them in 5, had them playing Philly second round, which you imagine is we'll get into that, what that potentially matchup could look like in a little bit, but you avoid them and instead you're playing New York or you're playing Atlanta. And I mean, the other part of me is like, look, I respect it. Milwaukee is a team who they're coming out here. I mean, they have maybe not the way the Clippers do, but there's a lot of pressure on Milwaukee to perform in the playoffs this year, given how well or how poorly, I should say, they looked last year and how just uninspiring the end of the season was. To me, I'm impressed by Milwaukee going out in what essentially is a playoff type game with seeding implications. They punched Miami in the mouth, said, "No, you got to come through us first round." And I respect them not backing down from a challenge. Almost to me, it's like, no, you're Milwaukee. We've almost started sleeping on how much of a chance I feel like they have coming out of the Eastern Conference. Now, it's going to be a hell of a road, and I think that's what people are worried about, is where it's like, if you're Milwaukee, you now got to beat Miami, Brooklyn pending some just insane meltdown in the first round, and then likely Philly in the conference finals. That's a brutal road a
That's
bit. I
tough.
mean, and then obviously whoever comes out of the West, like, you're going to get your money's worth if you win the finals this year. You're going to have beat 4 really tough teams. Now, again, I kind of respect that in a way a lot, because it's like, what's been the knock for Milwaukee? It's that Giannis hasn't showed up. If Giannis runs this gauntlet and wins the Eastern Conference, it's like, look, I don't want to ever hear of that ever again. Even if he wins 2 of these series and gets them to the conference finals, it's like, look, if you take out Miami and you take out Brooklyn, I don't really want to hear it ever again. They built this squad for the playoffs with Drew Holiday to defend. They love their rotation. Obviously, Chris Middleton has shown that he can play extremely well in the playoffs. I mean, he won them a game single-handedly against Miami last year in the playoffs. It's going to be a fun series. I mean, that's my takeaway, is that this is going to be an insanely fun series. I think we're getting 7 games right off the rip on this. I mean, the way I talked about Phoenix and the Lakers, that's kind of how I feel about this Milwaukee-Miami series. Like, we're going to lose one of these teams in the first round, and they're going to be heavyweights, and where it's disappointing almost in a way, because I mean, there are plenty of other scenarios where I could have seen them winning the series.
Yeah, that's the other part of it. I mean, you look, like you were saying, the kind of underrated nature that there is, the feeling around the Bucks right now. And maybe it is because of the loss in the playoffs last year, but I mean, you look at the record, man, they're only 3 games behind the Sixers record. They're 3 wins. They're only 2 wins behind the Nets. Like, they are up there when you look at the tiers essentially of the Eastern Conference. Like, in my opinion, the Sixers, Nets, and Bucks are in the same tier. And then it starts to drop off. Obviously, there's a decent win difference between the Bucks and Knicks and Hawks. But I kind of agree with you.
I
What's
think
that?
Miami is there. I think
Yeah,
Miami's in that 4.
I agree with you. I think Miami should be up there too. There is a win disparity there a little bit, but to that, the Bucks 8-2 in their last 10, the Heat 8-2 in their last 10 as well. So both teams that were making that push at the end of the season. So yeah, but to your point, I think both teams, fan bases, will feel like it is a major disappointment with a loss in the first round, and that's what we're going to get. One of them has to lose in the first round, so somebody's going to be disappointed.
I think you're less disappointed and devastated if you're Miami just because you went to the finals last year. I
Yeah.
think you look at this as like it stinks that we got Milwaukee first round, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
I think there's disappointment again because they're playing their best basketball of the year, and so I think that's tantalizing in a sense that you could go further, and even if you want at least the opportunity to take on Brooklyn, you want to just not flame out in the first round because it just makes it seem like that team was worse than it is because this
Yeah.
is not your traditional first round exit. Now, on the other hand, if I'm Milwaukee, if they lose in the first round this year, I mean, they already made some pretty big shakeups last year, but like Budenholzer, he might as well start packing if they lose in the
Well,
first round. I mean, it's all
yeah.
they, I mean, I think it's going to go to 7, but like Budenholzer, if he doesn't get to the conference finals this year, I think he might lose his job.
I think there are, in terms of a loss in the first round, there are bigger implications and bigger worries for the Bucks because, like you said, it would essentially be two let down ish playoff runs in a row.
Oh yeah, it would be a colossal disappointment for Milwaukee, in my opinion. That said, I don't think Milwaukee is losing this series. I do have Milwaukee in 7. I think we underrate their chances to come out of the East, but I think it's a really tough series. But I was impressed by them going out on their home floor, taking care of business, kind of
Yeah.
shaking off that mental like, no, we're not afraid of anybody. Like we think we're here. This is a different year. I like that mentality. I like Giannis stepping up huge in a game like that. And so I do think Milwaukee will win that series. Going over to New York and Atlanta at 4 and 5. Again, you've been excited about this matchup. You're thrilled about it. I am as well. I think these are two. I
Mhm.
mean, especially Atlanta. Like the national media has really not talked about Atlanta at all, and how well they played under Nate McMillan, and how I mean, this is a team that was back in 11th or 10th, and we were wondering they spend all this money. Is this a
Yeah.
colossal disappointment? Instead, they're right here where we kind of expected them to be once they, went all in and made the type of win now moves, winning 4 straight to end the year. Of course, I mean, they won all the games that they had to maintain that spot. It was a softer schedule, but at the same time, like you only play who's in front of you, and they did have to play the Wizards twice. Again, that's a team that's red hot right now, a team that's
Mhm.
fighting for playoff implications as well. And to the Knicks' point, they won 3 straight games where, I mean, they were trying to dig themselves out of that 6 seed. They needed a little bit of help with Miami losing to do that, but every one of those games had implications. And following that disappointing loss at overtime to the Lakers, they came out and handled their business. They held on. They won in overtime against Charlotte. They held on a close one against an undermanned Boston team, but somebody that was fighting as well. I was really impressed with how they looked down the stretch of that game on a back-to-back. I mean, I guess it just the Hawks are more of who we expected them to be just because they spent the money. That
Right.
said, I'm still really impressive because it's like, well, who are you and whether you actually do it or not is something to be said. And so I think again, tip your cap to Atlanta. But I mean, geez, oh man, like I mean, I know for me, and again, I've been kind of eating it all year on this one. I think everybody has, but it's like I thought the Knicks were going to be one of the worst 3 teams in the league. Like I thought they were playing for Cade Cunningham. They got the 4th seed. Like the New York Knicks are going to host a home playoff series with their young core without really making any adjustments other than bringing in Tibbs and a couple of guys on 1-year deals, a couple of veterans. I mean, talk about like guys like Reggie Bullock and Alec Burks and obviously Derrick Rose, who when he made the decision to get off Detroit and go to New York, we all kind of were like, that's where you want to make your run? Like, is this really where, if you want to contend, is this the best place to do it? They've been phenomenal, and they're not going to be a team that anybody wants to play in the playoffs either, with given how defensively good they are. I mean, that was on display the last game of the season against Boston, where I mean, it was Nerlens Noel with that block who kind of at the end of the game that really saved that and got them in that situation. Obviously, we don't need to say too much about Julius Randle, most improved player in the league this year, but This is a fun even matchup to be. I mean, both of these teams have never been here before. So in that sense, there's no real experience lean one way or the other. I kind of feel like this is another one to me. Like I could see this going 6, 7 games. We may get to go the distance on this one as well.
So, you mentioned it. There's a few angles I wanted to go, but the first one is: do you think, because of how little the expectations were for the Knicks, that Thibs gets Coach of the Year?
I think he's certainly in the conversation. I mean,
The
only reason I'm not saying 100% yes is just because Coach of the Year is so loaded, and I look at like Quinn Snyder won 52 games in the Western Conference, and they're in first place, so I feel like he should be in that conversation.
Monty Williams too, with the Suns. I mean, yeah,
exactly. Monty Williams with Phoenix, Mike Malone with Denver. Given how they've handled the Jamal Murray injury and how they've stayed afloat, I feel like he should be in that conversation. I mean, even Doc getting them to the number 1 seed, but I think all that I come back around as I'm saying these names and talking it out. I probably go back to Tibbs, given the expectations. Like the fact that they're 4,
right.
the fact that they're as good defensively as they are, the fact that they won 41 games without making any major adjustments, really, and just off the development too that we've seen out of RJ Barrett, we've seen out of Emmanuel Quickly, some of these other young guys as well. I'm impressed, and I feel like, I do feel like if I had a vote, I would probably be inclined to go Tibbs, and I'm a little impressed with the way he's adjusted his style as well.
Yeah.
That was probably my only knock is like, we know Tibbs is a good coach, but you just wonder if there's a limit or if there's a ceiling to it. Maybe there is eventually over the next couple of years, but you can only credit him for what he's done this team.
So
this year.
On top of that, you look at the Knicks and the Hawks, right? Both 41 and 31 on the season. The crazy thing to me is like their wins and losses on the road, their last 10 at home in the conference, they're all essentially the same. And I get it, they have the same record, but like it's the same across the board. In the conference, the Knicks are 25 and 17.
Their
At
point
home,
differential is the same.
Yeah, dude, they're 25 and 11 at home. They're 16 and 20 on the road. The Hawks are 25 and 11 at home and 16 and 20 on the road. The only difference is in conference. The Knicks have one game over them. The Hawks are 24 and 18 in conference. It's just so crazy to me. Like the teams are so similar and they're so young. Both are so young. Yes, the Hawks put a lot of money into it, and the Knicks didn't necessarily do that. They kind of fixed from within. It almost seems like, and so it's almost two different styles of a rebuild in a way, and I'm so excited for them to clash and, potentially make this a reoccurring, rivalry, like I kind of referenced, going forward. Both these teams are really young, so we can start this trend now, and for the next 5, 6, 7, maybe even 10 years, this can be a thing, and that's kind of what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, it certainly has the potential to be, like you said, a lot of young talent there, a lot of reasons for both of these franchises to be excited if you're moving forward. I mean, to me, if you're Atlanta, like even earlier this year, and I'll admit that I was one of them, like there were legitimate questions from me as if Trae Young could be like if he just needed more help, if he was the type of guy that if he was this bona fide superstar we thought he was, we knew he was offensively, but it's like, is he the type of guy that could lead you to success? He has been all that for Atlanta. And so I think, again, tip of the hat to him. I think this is going to be a really fun first round series. My initial inclination is Knicks at 7. I kind of go on the home court thing. I default to that a little bit. I just also trust the Knicks defense. That's the other thing is I think defense wins at this time of year. And they've been consistently all season long one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. And so if I'm going to pick that over, because I do think the Hawks are a slightly better offensive team, but I'm going to take the Knicks defense. I think the disparity there is a little bit. I think home court helps, and so I do think they're going to. I think they're going to win in 7 games.
Well, and to just kind of be the opposite side of that, I'm gonna go Hawks. I'm gonna go with the money. I'm gonna follow the money. Money can buy you wins, hopefully, and we'll see where it goes. But to that, I think with the Knicks, even if it were a first round exit, though I'm sure fans now would be upset because they were the higher seed. So in a way, it's kind of an upset. But really, you look at the teams; they're the exact same. So this can come down to a last second shot, essentially, in my mind, and. I think a loss for the Knicks, while it would suck, wouldn't hurt as much. It would hurt the Hawks if it's a first round loss. Yes, the expectations were lowered at the beginning of this season when the Hawks didn't play as well. But with all the money going in, I think there's you kind of look at it differently if the Hawks lose than if the Knicks lose.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I mean, the Knicks, like we said, we didn't expect anything from the Knicks this year. I mean, Knicks fans didn't expect
yeah,
anything from the Knicks this year. This is the best Knicks season. I mean, this is the first time they made the playoffs since 2013. And again, you have Carmelo Anthony then, so I guess expectations are higher. But in terms of sheer joy,
yeah,
I don't know the last time the Knicks had this much fun. I mean, maybe 2011 when those mellow teams were at the peak of their powers, but I mean, this
probably,
has been just so much fun. It's been buckle up and enjoy the ride. Watch Julius Randle evolve in front of your eyes and be better. Like that's the thing is like we always love stories just in the NBA across the board in general of guys just being better than we expected when
yeah,
everything goes not just right, but just way, way beyond. I mean, that's like I mean, we said it a billion times, but like how can you not be impressed with what Julius Randle has done this season and how high he's elevated his game and just I mean there's no world in the past 4 or 5 years that Julius Randle's been in the league where you could have convinced me that he was going to be an all NBA type player. And even when he
yeah.
signed that contract, I was kind of like, does you want to pay this much Julius Randle this much money? Is this a little bit of an overpay right now? And he's out here proving everybody wrong. And that's exactly what you just love to see in the game.
Of course. No, I completely agree. So the East should be fun. And we're obviously just gonna have to wait to the end of this week to see the way that it lands for the 76ers and the Nets.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt about that. And we will, we'll certainly have plenty of time to break down the second round. Again, I don't really see any upsets there. I think Brooklyn and Philly handle their business, and then
Yeah.
we can look at the second round later. Quick break before the West. Who's balling? Who's fallen? We got to do some of that. Our NBA version of the stock market. We always like to start with the good before the bad. So fallen or balling for me this week, excuse me, is the NBA Hall of Fame. We have inductions, and then of course we announced the newest class for 2021 this year. So first, I'll just start with the inductions. You had the speeches for Tim Duncan, for Kevin Garnett, Vanessa Bryant gave Kobe's speech. We'll get into that in a little bit and how just I think we've already known that among other reasons that we were going to get robbed. But this to me is not being able to be up there with Timmy and KG. It's one of the biggest robberies
Mm-hmm.
of Kobe not being here yet. Also, Eddie Sutton, Rudy Tomjanovich, Tamika Catchings, Kim Mulkey, and Barbara Stevens and Patrick Baumann. Patrick Baumann is a longtime FIBA executive, also in that class, so they got their inductions as well. Rudy T winning with the Rockets in the '90s, also a really good player in his own right. And unfortunately, a part of one of the more NBA's more infamous incidents. Of course, he almost died on the court when he got punched by Kermit Washington. Obviously, thankfully, now look at him. Rudy T's a Hall of Famer. So have to say that we're glad that worked out the way it did.
Yeah.
Certainly quite a moment that I think he's also thrilled that he's not associated with this anymore. When now that post Rockets coach and post working with Olajuwon, but also congratulations to the inductees as well this year. Ben Wallace, Chris Bosh, Chris Webber, and Paul Pierce all making the Hall of Fame. All four really deserving. I mean, again, these are guys that we grew up watching as kids, so I think there's still every time there's a Hall of Fame class, there's that element of it to me. Bosch, unfortunately, I think probably got in a little earlier than he should have, just given the unfortunate way his career ended with blood clots. A more than deserving Hall of Famer. It's just a shame because I think he very well could have still been playing right now, at least had a couple years left from when that happened. But again, shout out to everybody. Congratulations again, Ben Wallace, Chris Webber have been on hold for a little bit. I think they
Mm-hmm.
both deserve to be there. Paul Pierce goes without saying. But then just getting to what a class this year though with the induction speeches with KG and Tim Duncan and Kobe, just absolute legends. In the case of Tim Duncan and Kobe, who are probably two of the top 10 players to ever play. Kevin Garnett, no slacker in his own, right up there with them. They're just amazing speeches all around. You love KG's passion, you love Tim Duncan's just constant, the quiet dominance. The 20 plus years of greatness with Kobe. What else is there to be said? Relentless competitor, an icon,
Mm-hmm.
5-time champion. It's just sad. Like that was just part to me. Like it. I texted this to my buddy the other day when I was just like, every once in a while, I still think that Kobe's gone, and I just kind of get mad about it. Um, and just like what there still was to do and what was unfulfilled.
Yeah.
And this is just another example. Like this to me is like it could have been the way that MJ speech was. It's like you don't think Kobe remembered every single moment of his career, all his rivalries, all the trash talk, all the especially with Duncan and Kevin Garnett too. Are you kidding me? I mean, this is a guy
Yeah.
the way they all tied in together with them being Western. I mean, the Lakers and the Spurs being the premier Western Conference teams really of the millennium so far. And then with Kevin Garnett and Kobe, with having those two classic finals battles in '08 and in 2010, that part was just disappointing to me. But, loaded class. Again, salute to everybody. A great weekend at the Hall of Fame. And will be another great one next year. I mean, I'm excited for these four guys that are getting in now.
Well, and that's the thing is it's cool because now that we obviously pay closer attention to NBA, but also the guys that are getting inducted in, we were watching when we were younger. I remember being younger and these things happening, and it was like players that either I didn't like fully remember watching or really know, or I knew of them and heard of how good they were. But now it's like players that we knew and we watched and we saw. Some earlier than others, like you said with Chris Bosh, but either way, it's exciting to see these guys get in. I just wish they could. I don't know. There's something with the ceremony that I maybe it's just like a certain kind of person. Like I have trouble even watching like award shows, I
Yeah.
don't know, like Billboard Award. Like I don't know. To me, it just doesn't do anything for me. Like I'd rather go back and just watch the clip of Vanessa Bryant's speech. Like I'm not gonna like sit down my entire day to watch it, and maybe that sounds horrible, but I don't know. I'm more of a like I'll go back and watch the speeches or the clips or whatever they have to say
Yeah.
later, not necessarily watch the whole service type thing.
Yeah. No, I completely understand.
Yeah,
I love that you call it service. Um, But no, I completely agree with that. I mean, I usually don't watch them live. I usually just end up watching the speech
yeah,
later. I'm with you though. I don't really watch award shows at all. I watch the performances and that's it.
yeah,
I
and
don't really
even
care about
those,
the rest. Like
and it,
even with the ESPYS, like I don't
yeah,
watch the ESPYS.
no. So, all right, my ball is going to go out to Steph Curry, who just secured his second scoring title. Um, obviously that's a huge thing for him. He's 33 years old, but since April 10th, the Warriors are 15-5. Steph was also averaging 37.2 points per game in that time span to obviously make a run that the Warriors needed to get where they are right now to have a shot at the playoffs. And Steph Curry is a big part of that. LeBron James, like we said the other day, came out and was talking about how Steph should be the MVP. And, this is a big part of it because of his scoring. And so shout out to Steph for that.
Yeah, he's three. I mean, and there's no doubt about it. Like what he's done. I mean, even for him, I mean, you talk about the unanimous MVP years, and you look at his stats for them. I mean, he's doing career highs. He's finishing first in multiple categories. Like you
Yeah.
said, the scoring champ this year. He's been the guy, and I mean, there's just been a lot of people. Steph Curry is one of these people who just has ridiculous haters, and who just really irrationally and unfairly judge him on a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
and who kind of like he's not a champion already, and like he's not the centerpiece of one of the best teams in NBA history. But I think in a weird way, this year was the shut up for a lot of people, when he so blatantly took this team that I mean, it would be an absolute. I mean, you're talking about like one of the worst teams in the league probably without him. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about again they're in the Cade Cunningham sweepstakes. It's like last year all over again. They're playing for draft picks at this point. Instead, Steph has them in this playing game. Even if you go by the old models, if you get rid of the playing game, they would have been the 8 seed. They'd be in the playoffs right now. I think that that's a tremendous job. And so, yeah, I mean, there's not much else that can be said about Steph. I do think he's third in the MVP race. I think he's behind. I think he's behind Jokic and Joel. I still
Yeah.
think Jokic is obviously the MVP. Like you said earlier, I think it's weird that people just haven't accepted that at this point, and it feels like they're trying to make it anybody but him. But that's neither here nor there.
Mm-hmm.
He will no doubtly be the MVP in my mind. All right, falling for me this week, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder because Thunder, what are you doing? Winning the last game of the season. And I guess by proxy, I didn't want to put the Clippers in here because so the Clippers tanked their way into 4, which gets them totally out of the bracket with the Lakers. They wouldn't have to play the Lakers any earlier than the conference finals right now. And so I think there is something to be said about that. They ended up losing this game. What was the final score here? 117 or yeah, 117 to 112. Excuse me. I just want to make sure I got the Clippers score right. My fallen for OKC is it's like OKC, you did this just all-time tanking job. They had a net rating of points that were worse than any of the worst of the trust the process Sixers teams were. They were just absolutely horrific. And they had played themselves all the way down. They had 21 wins. They were tied with Orlando. They were only a game up on Detroit. Nobody was going to catch Houston. Houston was locked into number one.
Houston,
no
17 wins is impressive.
But you wanted to be in that top three, and instead you played yourself right out of it. You win this last game of the season, a completely meaningless game. And again, the odds are there, and they can still get Cade Cunningham, but you want to be in that top three. Instead, I think if you're Orlando, you're sending them roses because Cleveland, again, they were right there with them as well. But Orlando, they guaranteed their top spot for them. So the official bottom three is Houston's got 17, then Detroit is 2. Detroit had 20, and they lost their final game of the season. Miami, and then Orlando, they lost 7 straight overall to end the season, but 2 straight to the Sixers. I think the most impressive of the tanking losses was the last one with Orlando, because the Sixers were not remotely playing their starters yesterday, and Orlando still lost that game despite Cole Anthony doing everything possible not to. But credit to them. Oklahoma City, again, I just, you ruin your odds if you're playing. And, don't get me wrong, we know they have all the draft picks in the world, so I don't necessarily think they're having to worry about nailing this one. But it's like, boy, that's disappointing if they end up missing out on top 3 and if they come in at 4 or 5. I mean, when you can directly point to that last game. To the Clippers, like, I almost want to give it fallen because, like I said, they're at 4 now, so they're going to play. If they win their first round series against Dallas, which I have them as the favorite to, I think they're going to. I guess that kind of, I mean, we'll get into your fall in a sec, but that transitions us. But that's such a good bracket placement for them because then you play Utah or the Lakers, and this is going to sound disrespectful because Utah won 52 games. I'd rather play them than the Lakers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I get it's the don't go against LeBron James thing again, and I get it, but yes, it is kind of a slight in a way to the Utah Jazz, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a slight. I mean, they're the number 1 seed. You should be, shouldn't be like that.
And
but,
to that, for the Nuggets, I mean, with the Nuggets and the Clippers, that that's where that tiebreaker situation kind of comes in because they essentially have the same record too, so kind of works. By the way,
I saw this on CBS Sports. It was too late to be balling, but they literally tweeted as we were recording. Dude, hat tip to Tony Snell. You can put him on ball this week as well. Did you know that Tony Snell hasn't missed a free throw in 2 seasons?
Gee, how many does he take, though?
So this year he only took 11. So it's like a little like this year where it's like, okay, he only took 11 over the season. He took 32 last year, but the fact that he hasn't missed one, I mean, he was in 88. He was 37 of 42 the year before. The last time he missed one, though, was when he was playing with Milwaukee. The past 2 seasons, though, with Detroit and now with Atlanta, hasn't missed a single free throw. So shout Tony.
Jeez. Okay, fair enough.
Technical soon.
So my fallen, and I'm actually gonna try to. We're gonna try something here. I'm gonna try to share a thing on the stream.
Maybe I just. Now we're back. Now we're big.
There we go. Hey.
Yeah, okay, here we go.
All right, I'm gonna play you this clip. Okay, I'm ready. This is my falling.
Well, keeps it alive, but right to Taco Bell. Here comes Parker. Did I just say Taco Bell? Oh my God! You must be hungry, bro. I need to get some sleep.
He called Taco Fall Taco Bell.
Listen, I get it, Mike Breen. We all need some sleep. I'm so jealous that Knicks fans get to listen to Mike Breen and Walt Frazier every single regular season game. That's just it's so beautiful. And shout out to Mike Breen. Mike Breen's going to the Hall of Fame as well.
Of course,
but yeah, that is hilarious. I'm honestly semi-surprised that no one's made that mistake before. I thought maybe like slightly there'd be somebody would do that distinction. But look, I get it, Mike. We all want Taco Bell once in a while. I love, and I know you do too. Like, listen, we are a big pro Taco Bell podcast. You'll never hear any slander about the Bell from us. We're living Moss, baby.
Oh, dude, for sure. Although they did take away the Mexican pizza, which was a little disappointing, but I'll get past it. I'm there for my crunch wraps, and then I'll go home. That's my move.
Yeah. Yeah, Crunchwrap, Cheesy Gordita Crunch. Those are definitely the two best items on the menu. Also, bring back the loaded potato grillers. I think
Yeah.
if you're listening to Taco Bell, just gonna put that out there. All right, so switching gears to the West, taking a look at the first round for there, we kind of got into it a little bit with the way the Clippers losing that game is where you wonder if they're manipulating the standings a little bit. But still, the matchups officially will be pending the playing games. The 3-6 matchup, though, will be Denver and Portland. The 4-5 matchup will be the Clippers versus Dallas. The Clippers could have been the 3 had they won that game. Instead, Denver beats them on tiebreaker. So, I mean, if you're the Clippers, you'd have been playing Portland, but then you would have had the winner of 2-7, which, again, we assume it's going to be the Lakers. So then you get Phoenix or you get the Lakers. Either way, you got a second round date. Instead, you're looking at Utah versus the Lakers. I think it goes without saying I'd rather do that matchups. Unethical, maybe a little bit, but I do think it's kind of interesting that they found a way to lose to OKC, which is, losing to everybody right now.
Well, first, if you're because the Clippers and Denver essentially, like we were saying, have the same schedule. Like, would you rather be matched up against Dallas or Portland?
I think Portland. I think Dallas is the better team.
Yeah.
I think Portland has definite defensive woes at times. Like Portland has looked bad at points this year. Again, give them credit. They held on to 6 and they did what they needed to do. I mean, they were 8-2 over their last 10. But I don't really like. There's nothing about this Portland team, I guess, that makes me feel like they're any different than the other Portland teams. Like I just kind of, what you're getting. You are going to have to withstand Dame a little bit. They've got a couple of good players there in the mix. Like obviously CJ is there, Nurkic is there, Covington is there. Like I really like Norman Powell has been great for them since the trade deadline. So I still think Dallas with the Luka effect is just I don't know. It feels like they're better overall. They're better coached with Rick Carlisle. I really like what Tim Hardaway has done there. A couple of Dwight Powell has been awesome recently. Jalen Brunson got hurt, unfortunately, but I know he's been hooping for them as well. I don't know. But it's not like I'm not strong either way, put it that way. Like I think I'm not really like I'm not trying to avoid one versus pick one of them. I just think if I'm having to pick one out of the hat, I'd rather pick Portland. I guess my initial reaction to both these matchups is just you got the spice a little bit. I mean, we had Clippers Dallas last year. We saw that at times. And Luka had said that he and Marcus Morris had talked to they'd apologize, but I remember them going at it last year. So you get that over again. Obviously, Luka had the awesome game winner. That was a moment that everybody talked about. The Clippers did end up winning that series, but you get the rematch there on that front. And for Portland and Denver, I mean, you had that classic second rounder a few years ago. Again, it's a shame that Jamal Murray's not healthy, but these are two rival teams. These are teams that don't like each other. Portland beat Denver last game of the season to hold up their 6th spot and guarantee that matchup. And so I think that this is, again, you get that bad blood Northwest rivalry matchup. So I think from that perspective, I'm intrigued right off that alone.
Yeah, I agree with you. I kind of couldn't differentiate like with Dallas and Portland. I feel like in a way the matchups, like, for every point you can make for one, you can make a similar point for the other. And so I couldn't really differentiate which one I'd prefer to play. Though to that, I think the West is kind of chalk. I think the Clippers and Denver move on.
Yeah, I do too. I'm inclined to think, which goes against me saying that Dallas, because I do think Dallas is a better team than Portland, but I'm inclined to think there's going to be the upset. If anybody, it'll be Portland, just because I think Dame can take over a series. And I think, I want to see as the game slows down what Denver does without Jamal Murray. I think they've been fine with Michael Porter Jr. stepping up. But again, I'm inclined to pick Denver in the series as well. Like I have Denver in 6 or 7, but I do wonder what that looks like. I've got the Clippers in 6. I think the Clippers are playing great right now. I think that they've kind of got it figured out. I still really like the Rondo pickup for them. I mean, they're improvement mode with Paul George, but given the way that he's played this year, I'm inclined to think that he is proving it.
But
I do think
playoff stuff's different,
They already beat Dallas last year, and I don't think Dallas is any better really than they were last year. So to that token, I'm inclined to pick them again.
Yeah, I think the only potential upset I see here could potentially be a Utah or a Phoenix. No slight at either of them. Obviously it's LeBron James and Steph Curry. I don't think to that, I don't think both do it. Like, I don't think Lakers and Golden State come out against Utah and Phoenix and both get a win. But I definitely think, like you were saying, it could potentially be the Lakers that get a win here. And that I would be saying that probably against Utah or Phoenix just because it's LeBron James and that's how he is. I kind of hope we get into it. I don't think the NBA hopes this, but I hope we get into a situation where Utah and Phoenix both win and move on. And that would mean then Lakers and potentially Golden State are out. And it's like this new wave of Western Conference guys, like let's get some new blood in there. Obviously the Clippers would be there, but they feel like they've been there for a minute now because last year was disappointing. But, I feel like that could be kind of fun narrative side for, for us hardcore NBA fans. I think the NBA doesn't want that because then you have LeBron James and Steph Curry both out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
that's kind of how I feel.
I think they're getting one of them for sure. I think Utah is going to handle Golden State or whoever comes out of 9-10. Like, chance for an upset, sure, but like, I don't think
narrative-wise,
Denver last year. Denver is a drastically different team than whoever gets. Like, I just don't think this Golden State team, as good as Steph is playing, I don't think they can take them in a 7-game series.
The narrative side of me and the just absolute wants to see the world burn side of me this is what would be my ideal situation for the West. Golden State beats the Lakers to go up against Phoenix. Phoenix would then beat the Warriors. But then the Lakers have to go play Memphis in that loser bracket, and then that's where the Lakers win and go up against Utah. And then the Lakers beat Utah. That would be absolute world on fire craziness, and people would be so fired up.
And then the Clippers would do all that tanking last game for nothing. They'd have the Lakers second round then if that were to happen. I mean, and there's something to be said there. Like, I would pick, for the record, if the Lakers drop to 8 and they end up being 8, I would pick the same upset over Utah, if you will. Like, I would pick that over Utah as well. Obviously, I think Phoenix would try to avoid that. I just don't given the play-in games and given the Lakers team, I don't think there's a scenario where
they're not playing around.
7. Yeah. Even if they're 8, though, like, you're not worried about it. I mean, like you said, if they had to go up against Utah, the Clippers, and then, probably Phoenix at that point, I would think Phoenix would be the conference finals matchup. I mean, that to me would be, that'd be an amazing slate of run of games and series if the Lakers go on that push. I also think there are a lot of people who still want that Lakers-Clippers matchup and go, hey, if there's 7, you could maybe get that in the conference finals. So we'll see what happens there. I do think the Lakers would, if the Lakers end up beating Phoenix, I do think they'll handle easily whoever comes out at 3-6, just because Denver's hurt. Different story if Denver's healthy, but that's just the unfortunate reality. Like, I'd be talking about Denver maybe winning the conference if they were fully healthy. But yeah, the Lakers, there's way more intrigue just because of the Lakers in the play-in game, and I think that can shake the seeding up a little bit. The East intrigue is just more because Miami's the 6, and that they have to play Milwaukee. But that Milwaukee-Brooklyn second rounder has, classic potential. There's a lot. The second round of the series looks to be pretty well, and it's going to be a fun playoffs. These play-in games are going to be fun. The play-in game worked. I guess that's my big takeaway. It's just like, I have been so happy with the product the last month, and where it hasn't always been that. We've gone into podcasts kind of just in like a lull period where it's like, what do we even talk about right now? Like, how do you break down a 30-point blowout? We had 60-point blowouts in the middle of the season at one point this year.
And to that,
with that Toronto game.
And to that, really at the end of it all, because even the 10th seed is, potential to get into the playoffs, you had teams like the Pelicans that were trying to show out a little bit and make that run. You had the Spurs obviously doing it because they're in it now, but even with the Wizards, Pacers, Hornets, and Bulls, like, we saw Zach LaVine, frustrated leaving the court, realizing he's officially not going to make the playoffs and it's officially done. We had excitement in games that probably wouldn't have had excitement in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think it's here to stay. There's no doubt about that. Just, get people locked in and, get people excited for a fun slate.
For LeBron, that guy that you want fired, he's probably getting a raise.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He should get a raise. Oh, 150%. And thanks, LeBron. I appreciate it. Like, y'all are coming back. Look, we got you and Steph Curry. Like, oh, it's like, man, all the casuals are thrilled. Are you kidding me? You don't think the league's
Yeah.
excited about this matchup? We've talked about that a little bit, but ratings wise, I mean, it's harder to get someone to watch Memphis and San Antonio. It's not hard for you and I to watch that game, or for the people who listen to the
Right.
NBA podcasts, but like the casuals are less interested in that game. You tell the casuals that, like, yo, LeBron and Steph are playing in a 1-game playoff, and one of these teams may end up not making the playoffs if their team loses. Hello, that's must-see TV. So
Yes,
we will certainly be
agree.
locked in. Yeah, we will be 100% locked in. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Driving Dish NBA podcast, locking in with us. Again, happy playing games. We will be back later this week, kind of more normal. This episode, we know, it dropped a little bit later. I'm kind of waited on the recording front just with timing, and bear with us again. Our timing may be a little different over the next few weeks, just given how the schedule comes out with the playoffs and all that fun stuff. So we will definitely be talking about that. And we'll have a full first round preview once the play-ins are done. So stay tuned for that as well. In the meantime, leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We will read them on the podcast. Amazon Music, Google Play Store, Spreaker, TuneIn, Player FM, Stitcher. Anywhere you can find us, or anywhere you find podcasts, you can find us. Like the Facebook page at Driving Dish NBA Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Driving Dish NBA.
Yes, and find us on YouTube, Driving Dish NBA Podcast. You can find the video version of this podcast with some little video clips as we're going along here. So you can find us there, and be lucky subscriber number 8. That's what we're looking for right now.